So, for you, the agony of defeat.
Well, not for me per se, but for the Edo people. Like you were trying to say in your introduction, that the APC had clinched victory. But what about the Edo people who truly voted for Ifaluyi-Isibor? One would have thought that by now there will be some jubilation, in areas in Edo State, but the people are mourning. The entire state is in agony. So it's not really victory for the people. It may be a temporary victory for the APC and for Ifaluyi-Isibor, but he knows he doesn't have the legitimacy of the governance by the Edo people because they did not give him the highest number of lawful votes.
Well, to be entirely clear, we haven't gone around the whole of Edo State, so we don't know if people are celebrating in some parts or not. We certainly saw people celebrating at the tribunal.
Especially, of course, those are members of the APC who came with them from Benin. But you see, it's about the majority of the Edo people who came out to vote. And the Edo people voted based on competence and character. And it is their view that they didn't find confidence in Monday Okpebholo to give him the votes. That is why the people are majorly unhappy. Even on social media, people are mourning. But you see, we had an inkling of this yesterday, when there was a purported leakage of the ruling, and people were of the opinion that has it gotten this bad?
Well, actually, the APC are claiming that it was the PDP that leaked that thing.
Obviously, it was the work of the APC, and Nigerians. You could see the reactions of a majority of Nigerians on social media, and they were appalled that has it gotten to this point where people now have absolute disgust with the judiciary and lack of fairness, that we're now having to see purported leakages of a court ruling that should be the next day. And, true to what the people say, it appeared to be almost the same thing. How could it be that when there were several rulings at the appeal and even at the Supreme Court, where even at the electoral law, the Electoral Act says that where parties are able to provide substantial documentary evidence on a matter, as long as it speaks to those evidence, that they may not need oral evidence of witnesses. And we were dismayed to hear the tribunal judges make reference to those documents we tendered and expecting us to have brought over 700 witnesses.
Well, let me then ask you, because that was going to be my next question, to give us, as briefly as you can, an overview of what happened at that tribunal today from the perspective of your party, the PDP.
Thank you. We had three major issues before the tribunal. We had said that there was overvoting in over 133 polling units. We had also said that there was incomplete collation of figures in several polling units. We had also put forward evidence before the tribunal that in over or almost 400 polling units, INEC failed to submit herself to her guidelines in the Electoral Act Section 72, where that says that prior to the election, there must be a recording of sensitive particulars of sensitive election materials. And where that is not done, the results in that polling unit must be cancelled. Section 51 of the Electoral Act says that where the number of accredited voters exceed the number of those who voted, then there's overvoting, and the results in those polling units should be cancelled. See, we had documentary evidence to prove to the tribunal that there were these levels of contrivance against the Electoral Act. And for those reasons, Monday Okpebholo did not have the highest number of lawful votes. And we were shocked. Everyone in the courtroom, we were amused that the tribunal judges kept making reference to not bringing witnesses.
Well, they said you brought 19 witnesses.
Yes, we brought 19
before
witnesses.
The tribunal, as well as lots of documents.
Yes.
I mean, the APC called 4 witnesses, and the Electoral Commission did not call any witnesses at all.
Yes.
So the burden was on you to prove your case.
Absolutely, and that's why we presented documentary evidence, certified true copy from INEC. Those were all INEC documents. None was manufactured by us. And INEC at no point said that they were refusing those documents because they were certified true copies. They were from EC8As, from the polling units and agent copies, and they were from EC8As downloaded from the IRM as provided to us by the INEC, and they were certified, and they were BVAS extracts. These are all INEC documents, and so we were wondering, yes, we didn't think we needed to provide over 700 witnesses because we're challenging results in over 700 polling units. But sadly and shockingly, Nigerians are worried that how is it then that the tribunal would require you to provide witnesses in all those areas when there's documentary evidence certified by INEC to show that yes, there was overvoting, yes, there was non-prior serialization of sensitive election materials, yes, there was obvious incomplete collation of scores, and so the Edo people feel that this is just a glitch. It is not a catastrophe.
Right. Well, let's just stay on the track of what happened at that tribunal, not just today, but over the period. Because the APC had claimed that earlier, the tribunal at the tribunal hearing, that the polling units that the PDP tendered documents about, when compared with the ones INEC presented, still showed that the APC candidate was well ahead of the PDP, and that in effect, your candidate failed to prove that there was overvoting.
That's obviously not true. I just said the Electoral Act, Section 51, explicitly explains what overvoting means. When people who ended up voting are more than those that were accredited by INEC, are more than those that are accredited even according to the Beavers machine, then that is obviously overvoting. If 10 people came for accreditation, and at the end of the day, 11 people voted, that's overvoting, and the law says cancel that result.
So what did the tribunal say about that particular overvoting?
Well, in over 133 units where we complained of this overvoting, our prayer was that since the Electoral Act says those results be cancelled, the tribunal should cancel the results. But the tribunal, in her wisdom, if you allow me, says that we did not have witnesses who were eyewitnesses at the election day to determine overvoting. How does that make any sense when there are documents to show, INEC certified documents to show that there was overvoting? It was vague and nebulous, and one is having a hard time trying to understand the veracity of this kind of justice, where documentary evidence no longer matter in a tribunal. That is sick.
And you were also challenging the results because you allege that the election was not conducted in compliance with the Electoral Act.
Absolutely.
That includes the overvoting and something else,
yes.
Other things.
You see, there's prior recording of serial numbers and the quantity of the ballot paper, the Beavers machine,
right,
and other sensitive materials. And INEC, according to the Electoral Act, says that where that prior recording does not exist, results in those polling units must be cancelled. And that was what we were saying. In over 390 polling units, this did not exist. And so, do we need to have witnesses who are not INEC staff, who do not have any business with the prior recording, to prove to the tribunal that there was non-serialization of this information? No. We had documents to show that from EC25B, from EC40A are the documents that INEC says should be duly filled to show that there was prior recording of these serialized details, but there wasn't. So we are still trying to understand, the conclusion that the tribunal has reached, and is still very interesting. You could see people, even in the APC, wondering that the tribunal had agreed that all the documents we were tendering, being INEC documents, were admissible in court. That INEC didn't tender them doesn't mean that it's not admissible. So long as they were INEC documents, they were. And so if the tribunal had accepted those documentary evidence, on what premise then are you deciding that we must have witnesses in each polling unit to testify?
Right. So basically, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay the importance of the points that you're making, but basically, according to the tribunal, you failed to prove your case. You were not able to prove the allegations of corruption. You failed to prove that. You talked about problems in dozens of polling stations, and you also failed to prove that, according to the tribunal.
Well, that's why we are glad that that is not the last bus stop. we have rights to appeal.
So the presumption is that you're going to appeal. I mean, you intend to exhaust the entire appeals
on
process?
behalf of the Edo people. That is what they require of us to do, because they are obviously not pleased with the outcome of this tribunal judgment, and they are requesting that Aswan Ighodalo, who they truly voted for, should continue to fight for them, because this is not really about Aswan Ighodalo. This is about the mandate given to him by the Edo people. And I know a lot of them are unhappy right now, but I'm trying to build some hope in them that we cannot give up. We are not defeated. The people can never be defeated, no matter how much there appears to be an external influence on the judiciary. And that is also very sad. Nigerians feel that the sanctity of democracy, the sanctity of the judiciary is slipping off our fingers. Nigerians were watching, were looking at the judiciary to see if they could redeem themselves in this tribunal case for Edo State, because most people know that Aswan Ighodalo truly won the elections. And so Nigerians generally are upset. And so, but we're not giving up on the judiciary. This is the only system.
But I mean, it sounds like you're saying that these tribunals are subject to political pressure.
That is the general impression of the Nigerian people. Nigerians really do not have confidence in the judiciary, just like they've lost confidence in the legislature and the executive. But, within the conference...
But I mean, sorry to interrupt you. When you say Nigerians,
yes,
that's Nigerians who are your supporters, because supporters of the APC, who are significant in numbers, I mean, they're rejoicing. They obviously think the judiciary
Charles,
did
I can
the
tell
right
you this
thing.
for a fact. At their unguarded moments, they are very upset with the trajectory Nigeria is going. How can it be that people feel that the executive have an influence over judicial matters? That is what, if you do an opinion poll, Nigerians will tell you that they are disappointed that the tripod that should hold forth our democracy is obliterated, because now we can't have confidence in the executive. Now Nigerians don't have confidence in the legislature. We were only hoping that the judiciary will be able to redeem themselves. However, we still have some confidence that it is not all, it's not a catastrophe yet. This is just a glitch. We know that the appeal courts would do the best they can to salvage the situation, to save the name of the judiciary, to save the grace Edo people gave to Aswan Ighodalo, and at the end of the day, declare him winner of the election.
Well, I mean, in fairness to the judiciary, they have come out in the past to overturn results that were declared by the Electoral Commission. I mean, the tribunal is essentially saying that they do their assessments based on the evidence submitted to them and the facts before them, as well as their interpretation of the laws that govern those elections. So to some extent, I mean, you also have to blame yourself based on the way that you presented your arguments and your evidence.
Because we presented our arguments based on the Electoral Act, and that's what I'm trying to explain to you. The Electoral Act nowhere states that witnesses must be called in every instance to prove any case where there is documentary evidence. That is what the law says.
Yeah, but you brought 19 witnesses, and I understand that just 5 of them were polling agents or something.
Charles, we didn't even need to bring 19 witnesses, because Section 137 of the Electoral Act says that oral evidence is not necessary where there's documentary evidence. That is not our document. That's the Electoral Act. So we brought some witnesses. We didn't even need to, because our documents were speaking to the facts in our case. And so the fact that, we didn't bring enough witnesses like the tribunal is trying to assume is indeed laughable and ludicrous, because, come on, look at your Electoral Act. And we have seen cases before, just like you said, where the tribunal gives a judgment and the appeal courts, in many cases overrules that judgment. Or even in cases like the Zamfara case or Plateau case, where the tribunal and the appeal court gave the same judgment, the Supreme Court overruled it. So that's why I'm saying that we have not lost hope completely in our judiciary.
But you do realize that obviously you can't submit new evidence when you go higher up.
Obviously, we don't intend to.
You see what I mean?
We don't intend to.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't be able to in
exactly,
any case.
But the documents submitted were not PDP documents. They were not Aswan Ighodalo's documents. They were documents of INEC. So it's either INEC is refusing to admit that those are their documents, or I don't know what else is the case. If all the documents are brought before the courts were documents given to us and certified by INEC, and all these documents substantiate our arguments, we see no reason why we should have a judgment not in our favor.
So you're definitely going to appeal?
Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, I wonder, just on a personal level, how crushing this loss today is for you, because I mean, I know you are the spokesman for Asue Ighodalo, and I mean, I've seen you talking, you know, and talking very articulately. I mean, about, you know, I mean, you've come here before, you had all these programs and ideas and the things you wanted to do and so on, and big stumbling block here.
Well, it is a challenge, you know. I want to call it a glitch, where we're not crushed, you know, because we represent the majority of the Edo people. And so we are trying to let the people know that we're still fighting for them. Asue Ighodalo would not stop fighting until his mandate is reclaimed. And yes, we could be a little bit upset now, not because of how we feel, you know, personally, but the outcome, you know, of the tribunal. We were expecting, Nigerians generally were looking forward to the Edo case, because they were thinking that the Edo case would be like the cynosure of all eyes. Let us see what's going to happen in Edo. We know that the guy who is there now, you know, you've had, I mean, most people have had to interview him and to gauge his cerebral capacity, and the man appears to be lost. And so they're feeling that Edo State, you know, at the level where God, you know, Basaki left the state, we cannot leave the state, you know, to be run by these people who are, like some of people have interpreted them to be barely literate. And that's why we're saying all the negatives about Edo pop up in the news. There's hardly any good news that you've heard about Edo State in the last 3 months. And that is sad, because that's an Edo where we took leadership and governance to a very high level, where other states were coming to borrow from us, from what we're doing. But now most of what you hear in Edo is the inability of the government to lead the people, the inability of the governor to articulate his ideas. Nobody knows what he plans to do in education, security. I mean, we can obviously see that we've been in the news for very bad reasons. So these are the issues that really bother the people. And it's really not about us as individuals, because we have done our best and the people can compare. You know, Edo was #1 in digital transformation across West Africa. Where are we today? You know, even the official website of the Edo State government has crashed. So you can see that, you know, we went from a level where people were proud of us, where Edo people home and abroad were speaking good things about Edo State, to now where nobody even wants to talk about Edo State. We're seeing the governor, you know, walking from place to place. The man has no direction, there's no effort, there's no force, there's no vibe, there's no zeal, there's no zest, there's practically no life in governance in Edo State today. And that's what really worries us, to make sure that we would not just sit idly and watch this happen. Let us continue to fight for the people. Let us speak up and speak out for them, because they do not deserve the kind of leadership they have now.
And have you spoken to Mr. Ighodalo today? Did you speak to him after this verdict?
Yes, just before I got
here. What was his reaction and his mood?
Well, Mr. Asue Ighodalo understands that the election process there's a pre-election process, there's an election process, and a post-election process. So we are in the post-election process. He's still very full of energy. He's hopeful in the appeal. And he asked me to tell the Edo people that he's still going to keep fighting for them. He's still going to be speaking for them. And he will always show up for them whenever they need him to, especially concerning this matter, to make sure he pushes it to a logical conclusion.
And for you personally, I mean, you've become quite well known, not just because you were sort of speaking on behalf of Asue Ighodalo, but at one point you loudly proclaimed yourself as being an obedient, even though you were in the opposing PDP party. Are you still an obedient, or have you turned disobedient?
Well, at the time, we saw in Mr. Peter Obi the ability and the capacity to lead Nigeria right. And I mean, we've seen where Nigeria has, you know, been driven to in the past couple of months. And even members of the APC are unhappy about it. So we do not regret at all the energy we put into the Peter Obi campaign, and we're hoping that come 2027, we'll have reasonable leaders, bubble up ideas around the electoral space that Nigerians could, reason out to select or elect those that will lead them. But it is true that the crop of leaders we have now running the country, there's nothing to write home about them.
And you personally, are you going to run for elected office at some point?
Well, I'm still very young, I'm in my prime, and there's a whole lot ahead for me in the future. And let's see how it goes.
Right. And just returning to the issue of the tribunal today, there are also two other cases, two other petitions that were dismissed. That, I mean, obviously you don't speak on their behalf, but that of the Action Alliance and the Accord Party. So, I mean, a pretty big victory for the APC today. I mean, they swept the board.
in that sense, there was victory for the APC. But I'm thinking that as politicians, we should be more worried about victory for the people. We must ascend above that mundane thinking of partisanship.
Yeah, but I suspect that the APC are going to say it's a victory for the people as well.
No, but it cannot be for the people when they know that they do not have the legitimacy of the people of Edo State. And so we are hoping that while we pursue this case to the appeal courts, because we are sure we'll win at the appeal court and they will have to go to the Supreme Court, we are sure that between now and when the Supreme Court gives judgment, we can assist in some form of constructive criticism to make sure that Edo State is not completely destroyed before Okpebholo takes up the reins of the state.
And how much time have you got before you have to go to the appeals
I think
court?
For the appeal,
and how much time have they got to make the decision?
Yeah, I think for the appeal we have 60 days, and for the Supreme Court we have 60 days. So Edo people, just bear it a little bit. We have 120 days. We're going to strive through these dark days, through this dark tunnel, but hope is coming. Joy is coming. Okpebholo is coming.